Propose that I start. So hello everyone, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for our panelists to be there, but I have another opportunity to thank them, and thank you for staff, of course, for making everything be happening. And it is a lot of work. Just before we get started, I have been asked to give you a couple of technical notes. There will be a question and answer session after all speakers. And you can already, if you need, send your questions in the meantime. You can write them in the question and answer section directly with your name and the name of the speaker that your question is directed at. Please do be careful of unmuting yourself, muting yourself and not making all noise coming in the meeting. And then we will start. So we wanted to the group, we wanted to organize this session because this question of the use of biometric mass surveillance in public spaces is one of our key campaigns at the moment of the Green Group in the Parliament, because it's, of course, an important, very important issue at the moment. It happens everywhere. It happens without our consent. It happens without our knowledge. It poses a threat to our daily lives, and it is getting more and more solution for government in all sorts of situations. France, for the moment, for example, I'm in France just at the moment in the French Senate, and we've been talking about this in fact with our French Green senators, because they are under pressure every day nearly on these topics, because France is one of the countries, because of terrorism and all sorts of other things, is trying to put more and more surveillance of population, tools of surveillance of population in place. And for example, recently it proposed to use surveillance cameras to monitor whether passengers on public transport were wearing masks or not during the pandemic. And it also wants to surveil all manifestations, demonstrations in the streets, and all of this. Mass technologies are, of course, a threat to our fundamental rights, but it is also very inaccurate and discriminatory. We have seen, because in US especially, because they have been putting it in practice earlier than us, and so we can learn from their experience and what they've been doing, and we have seen how much these surveillance technologies have made a lot of errors, and have often in fact accused wrong people of crimes, and they are now in fact in some states questioning the use of it, which is good news, because there have been so much women and minority people misidentified by these tools. And this leads, of course, to miscarriage of justice, wrongful detention, breaches of citizens' fundamental rights. And then also, we have it now more and more in public spaces where we don't even know that it's there. So even private sectors are using it today, and we need to be really worried about it, because Europe is at the moment constructing regulation about it, and it's a good opportunity at the moment to try to have very much stronger regulation about this. To talk about this, we have today with us Andrea Bellu. You are Campaigns and Communication Manager at the European Digital Rights Network. You will give us an overview on what biometric mass surveillance is, why it's problematic, and some info on Reclaim Your Face European Citizen Initiative. So this is this initiative to say that we should ban facial recognition. A number of NGOs are involved in it, and the Green Group in the Parliament is supporting very much this call for a ban, and we are campaigning for it. Andrej Petrovski, you are director at the Serbian-based Share Foundation. You are going to talk to us about a very specific example and very concerning example at the doors of European Union in Serbia, a country asking to enter the European Union. You alerted us a few months ago, a year ago, about this. We've been working with you closely since then, and thank you very much for the work you've been doing. You're going to expose it, because indeed in Belgrade today, Serbia is thinking of having a camera on every corner of the street, but you will tell us more about this. And Santos Valgrem, you are Senior Advocacy Officer at the European Network Against Racism. You will talk about the human rights risks for biometric mass surveillance and the huge risk of discriminations. And then finally, Annika, our right and democracy campaigner from the Green EFA group in the European Parliament, Annika Ojala, will give us an overview of the group campaign. So I propose that immediately we go to you, Andrea Bellu, to give us an overview.
Thank you very much. I'm going to quickly start my screen share. Voila. I hope you can see it on the entirety of your screen. Reclaim Your Face, a campaign that we started some time ago, before we even started with the European Citizen Initiative, and that has in its kind of incipience a work done by a lot of civil society across Europe. I come from EDRI, which is a network of digital rights NGOs in Europe, but beyond. We're 45 in total. And how we started engaging with this topic is with the work of my colleague Ela Jakubowska, who is actually supposed to be talking here today, and due to medical reason is not able, but she is still in the chat for the later Q&A. She led the paper on looking at the lawfulness of biometric mass surveillance practices. In December 2019, this process started. In April 2020, the network concluded research shows the practice must be banned. Fundamental rights demands to the European Commission included this ban, along with transparency on the processes and reviews of programs. Now, when we're talking about biometric data, it is important to think that this is unique and identifiable data, that each and every single one of us can be identified based on. It looks at data about our body and our behavior. Data about our body, among the most famous ones is of course facial recognition, retina recognition, voice recognition. But when we're talking about behavioral data, we also look at the way we walk, the way we type, even the way weight is distributed sitting on a chair. That is all identifiable and unique to every single one of us. And mass surveillance, in this context, mass surveillance, or biometric mass surveillance in particular, is any monitoring, tracking, and otherwise processing of the biometric data of individuals or groups done in an indiscriminate or arbitrarily targeted manner. Mass surveillance is unlawful in the EU, according to the European Court of Justice, and this opinion has just 2 days ago been reinforced with the recent ruling against Sweden and Great Britain governments. Nevertheless, the practice keeps growing due to the legal vacuum. When we're talking about mass surveillance, we're talking about publicly accessible spaces, and biometric mass surveillance in particular has been observed in Europe in streets, parks, and public squares, but also in terms of stadiums or concert halls or supermarkets, as well as train stations or public transportation, as you previously mentioned, Gwendolyn, but also online spaces. And here we're talking about, for example, mass scraping of biometric data such as facial data. Some of you are already perhaps familiar with Clearview AI and the company's practices. The most affected groups are the ones, communities that have been historically marginalized and silenced. People of color or LGBTQI+ community are at the forefront of the harms. People on the move and migrants as well, or religious communities. Young people, human rights defender and journalists documenting abuses, as well as people with disabilities and neurodiverse people. And when we're talking about the most affected groups, of course, it is very important to keep in mind those at the intersection of these communities who are by far the most affected. When we're talking about what is it that we are risking, it's important to think that treating as of a crime is an attack to the presumption of innocence. It creates a society of suspicion. It has chilling effects for anyone that would like to express a thought, an identity, but also for anyone who wants to organize and act and fight against power. When power surveils, it is very difficult to challenge that power. And also we're looking at discrimination risks. Data is used to infer judgments on people based on their race, on their gender, on their disability. And predictions are made, and alleged predictions made on how dangerous someone is, or how trustful someone is, or even what their sexual orientation is. Finally, it's important to think of the risks in terms of freedom and autonomy of each and every one of us to decide over our own life. But it is also important to think of this in terms of collective decisions that we make. As a society, what do we want to build? And it is very important to think that we're not only talking about state surveillance here. Powerful commercial actors can use biometric mass surveillance in equally harmful ways. This can influence the parameters of the society that we're building, also in terms of the way we experience, for example, advertising or our consumer choice or access to certain commercial spaces. February 17th this year, we launched the European Citizen Initiative calling for a ban on biometric mass surveillance practices. Currently, we're 61 organizations, civil society spread across Europe from a variety of angles and human rights. We launched on the 30th of March evidence that documents biometric mass surveillance practices spread in more countries that we would like to point: Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, Italy, Greece, Poland, Slovenia, just too many. For details, you can, of course, check our website. People have started to mobilize in several locations. And even though the ECI and the European Citizen Initiative is not so well known as an instrument, we have received a lot of support. And of course, support came a lot also from the members of the European Parliament, who sent 2 letters before the EU's proposal for an AI law. More than 61 members urged the EU to ban biometric mass surveillance. Then we have seen the Italian Data Protection Authority blocking facial recognition systems. We've seen a member of the Italian Parliament proposing a moratorium. Last year, the Dutch Data Protection Authority sent a warning to supermarkets in regards to facial recognition, mass facial recognition as well. When the AI law was proposed, we were happy to see language that we have promoted beforehand. A ban for biometric mass surveillance practices has been on a very central piece there. However, it only referred to law enforcement use with too many exceptions, we believe. This is why it is very important to draw attention to the commercial use of biometric data in a mass surveillance scope. Just 2 days ago, a new coordinated set of complaints hit Clearview AI. We basically launched complaints in 5 different countries at data protection authorities, pointing at the unlawfulness of online scraping of faces that is indeed a type of biometric mass surveillance also. I will just stop here. So I leave more room for the Q&A, but yeah, I'd be happy to hear your questions.
Thank you so much. This was very clear. Now we give the floor to Juliana to go into more details about discrimination and risk for our human rights.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation, Madeline. today representing the European Network Against Racism. Just for a disclaimer, I'm a mom with 2 kids running around, so if you hear some voices and a screaming of a cat, it's just my family working on a Friday afternoon. I have prepared a presentation for you, despite of the background noise. Thank you very much again for this. I had already an opportunity to meet Gwen Willing and the other colleagues in the French discussion, but it's always good to come back to have a wider audience to go deeper a little bit on the specificities of our work, touching specifically the communities affected by racism. INAR has started to work more and more in this field since 2019, and of course our concern was to better understand how the use of systems to provide, to surveil, and to provide the logic of discrimination. But this was not new because everybody is familiar with police brutality, everybody is familiar with the state violence, everybody is familiar with institutional discrimination. So this was not new. What was new for us is how these technologies, which were also not new, were only amplifying the discriminatory aspects that were before never seen in the offline world, but now they were exacerbating with the digital tools. So what was the point of concern of this exercise that led to the production of this report, Data-Driven Policy, the Hardwiring of Discriminatory Police Practice Across Europe, was to why we give the sense that technology is neutral, why we're still providing this narrative that there is a level of protection and everything is fine. For those who do not understand the concept of hardwiring, exactly that. So how technology is just exacerbating discriminatory practice, especially conducted by law enforcement authorities. So there are 3 elements that were very clear in this research and this mapping exercise. Was, first of all, that technology disproportionately affect ethnic and racialized communities. Second one, that algorithm-driven identification technologies disproportionately misidentify people from Black and other ethnic minorities, but also women. Not only racialized minorities, but if you intersect on gender, this has other further ramifications. And finally, how predictive policing systems are likely to present geographic areas and communities with a high proportion of minority risk. So how these geographical predictive tools, they are being disproportionately used in areas with a high concentration of ethnic minorities and groups. One of many key point of reflections that was very conclusive from this experience was to understand that the majority of the numbers of companies behind the development of this technology were founded by former intelligence or law enforcement agents. So behind the mindset of how these algorithms are being produced, there is a rather the bias mentality of the security measures and the security policy that are there to over-police some target groups. So if you have this already in your mindset with technology, what we do, you just go and transfer. The same way you reproduce some stereotypes and stigma. What is also a point of reflection is that most of this data collected is just transferred but never analyzed. They are never explored. They are never disaggregated to better understand how this is really deeply affecting, especially target groups. And this leads to some categorization of groups. Some groups that are more suspicious, some groups are more at risk, and some groups will be potentially even more racialized by these tools. And when I'm talking about suspicious risks and racialization, I'm talking about as well how people with certain stereotypes, reproducing certain behaviors, belonging to a certain cultural background, will be further discriminated just because they look as a group of risk. In terms of human rights violations of racialized minorities, there are some key elements. So these are not new evidence, not new findings, and not new practice. These were already there since the beginning. If you can recall, in terms of the European history of police violence and brutality, one of the first police brutality evidence comes from the 80s in Germany already, with the case of Antonio Amadeo. This is not new here in the European context. But how are we going to use this tool to extend your control and to expand your surveillance on certain groups? And what this is leading in terms of violation? To further ethnic profiling. If before technology, if before the use of technology, ethnic groups and racialized minorities, they were sometimes 5 times more stop and search than white citizens. With the technology, this is exploding. So what we see is really a massive control of people occupying the public space, and therefore they are subject to more strict control rather than compared to other groups. The question of suspicion of risks. Why I can be a risk to somebody else? How I'm being profiled like that? Why I'm being identified like that? Where this information is come from? And this is just, the question is also how there is this data that is transferred from one database to the other. So we are just adding layers of suspicions of people. They are being controlled without even understanding why they are being over-surveyed. Then this leads to the question of discrimination, of course. Ethnic profiling, targeting people as a group of risk, is of course discriminatory, is of course against the principle of non-discrimination, and beyond that is an offense to the principle of equal treatment. So again, here we're going to understand this process of racialization, on how some systemic practice that are discriminatory going to exclude socially, economically, structurally certain groups. So technology just comes to amplify all that. But what we see even more is not even the discriminatory aspect of the racialization process, but also the criminalization of racialization. So here we are still further criminalizing these groups. So not only monitoring, but also targeting as potential criminals, and also bringing them to these bias are being brought them to design and to the development of the theory of what is criminal or who could be potentially be a criminal. In a nutshell, what does it mean? That all these minorities are being over-policed and underprotected. If you take a look what happened, especially in the context of the COVID, where these tools were also extensively used, racialized groups, or at least 3 times more stops and search than the average European citizen, and even more, they are those who got the highest fine from the law enforcement authorities when occupying public space. When in transit, when they stop and search by the use of these machines, they would also get more financially higher financial fees. So this is also a question on how financially this is also bringing the economic case of discrimination. I have much more to talk, but I'm also very interested to hear to the other colleagues. There is also a research from in the field of employment, also how biometric technologies is also preventing minorities to access the labor market, but also to progress in their career due to these tools that are preventing them to be treated as equal. If you are today a migrant and you want to access the labor market, probably you're going to talk to a machine until the stage 7 of recruitment process. So how you can ensure that all these technologies are really neutral and inclusive? I'll stop here, but I'm very glad to continue these discussions with the colleagues later on. Thank you.
Yes, we are focusing today more on the very human rights, but indeed access certain number also of social security questions, and all this is more and more based on algorithm and facial recognition tools that are indeed there again a problem. Now, Andrea, we let you talk about the very specific situation in Serbia and what we can learn from this lesson at our just next door to us.
Yeah, a short horror story for this nice sunny afternoon. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Gwen. Thanks, Jasmine. Everyone. Hi, Andrea, Anika, and the new people I just met today. It's really nice to be part of this group. Yeah, so non-EU member state that I live in, Serbia, and our government basically wants to implement, and they're implementing basically a system for mass biometric surveillance in the form of face recognition cameras that are being installed in the streets of Belgrade. I'm going to share a link.
You've been muted.
Yeah,
be careful.
I'm going to share my screen and share a link in the chat. For our website, basically what we've been working on for the past over 2 years now. And this is a synthesis of almost everything that we've done regarding this initiative. So first and foremost, the 2.5 years ago, to be more precise, the Minister of Internal, the Minister of Police in Serbia, announced that there will be no corner in the city of Belgrade that won't be covered with smart surveillance. Yeah, at the moment the concept was still not introduced in the country or the region, so we tried to dig up what he means by that. And we found out that they're procuring biometric face recognition systems, so smart cameras, and software from Huawei, who is a Chinese, this big Chinese company that produces different sorts of technology, and mostly infrastructural technology, that has had a partnership agreement with the Serbian government since a few years before this project was announced. This project is within the so-called Safe City or Safe Society, an initiative by the basically Chinese government to implement this and other types of surveillance in small to medium-sized cities. In their standards, Belgrade is well, more of a medium-sized but kind of small city. There are a lot of cities bigger than Belgrade in China who have implemented even more intrusive technology, but on European soil, this would make Belgrade the first city to have its entire territory covered with smart surveillance, with a face recognition system that will be able to follow every single person and their movement within the covered area, which is, as I said, the entire city. So we're not speaking isolated area around stadiums. We're not speaking particular objects of interest. We're speaking everything within our city. Now, what we wanted to find out first of all is basically how this system works. It has several segments. The first of the segments is technology, basically how it works. And for this purpose, we used Huawei's own intellectual property patents, basically the technology that they had patented for this purpose. So there were thousands of different patents that my colleagues and other people and enthusiasts from this Hiljade Kamera, meaning thousands of cameras initiative, went through, analyzed, read, and extracted all the relevant data. But also a case study published then on the website of Huawei, which was removed about 20 hours after we published our first text on the topic, saying that there was a case study, meaning that the ministry or someone from Serbia is well connected to Huawei and could ask them to basically remove the content from their website, because it was quite braggy. They were quite proud of having implemented segments of their Safe Society system in Europe. So yeah, it was we archived it, and we have it for our own purposes, and we published it on our website. Then we have, other than the cameras, we have the monitoring aspect, which is basically management of the entire system, rotating the cameras, focusing on particular objects, setting up alarms. So if this system is very, very advanced. You could set up an alarm that you get a notification every time a particular person appears somewhere or appears anywhere or meets with another person. So it's very advanced system that would basically track all the physical movement within the city. It also recognizes plates, obviously, and other types of objects. Then storage. Storage is a very specific aspect because we're speaking about video feed, which is quite bulky for storage in general. So Huawei obviously thought of a way to optimize this footage, this video materials, and have a very efficient way of storing it. And then the last aspect, which is basically the most intrusive aspect, and that is the analytics or the analysis that the ministry, the police basically can perform on the data that they have. And also bear in mind that the police in Serbia also issues the biometric identification documents like ID cards and passports, meaning that they already have a clear biometric picture of every citizen in the country who has an ID. So what we did from our side is tried to map out all the cameras that are being set up in Belgrade. At the moment, there is over 1,100 cameras on over 200 something, between 200 and 300 locations. So this is a map of basically all the cameras that we ourselves and our community citizens have mapped out. So these are all verified locations. People would send us on Twitter or email location and pictures of a camera, but we also verify every location. So we try to keep this map up to date. So you can see that basically the entire territory of the city is pretty much covered at the moment, and they're still setting up additional cameras. So it will literally be no corner in the city that doesn't have that is not covered with this type of equipment. Other initiatives from our side include a video that we made. You can find it on the website on the link that I sent in chat. We obviously call for people to map cameras and send us details and send us the details of the locations where the cameras can be found. We have designed some posters, etc. We were part of the Reclaim Your Face petition that took place in the last few months of last year. So together with Edri and, as Andrea mentioned, with other partners, we managed to get a lot of signatures from all around Europe. Thousands and thousands of people said that they do not want face recognition and biometric mass surveillance in their city, in their community. We are supporting Edri also with the ECI, even though people who are not citizens of the EU cannot actually sign the ECI. We have been working closely with Gwen's office, and also Viola has been involved as well, other Green MPs. So we're really grateful basically for the support that we get on the political side, because we believe that this is very important. We also work with organizations such as the Heinrich Böll Foundation, which is basically a green foundation that has supported us in various aspects, not for this particular project, because this initiative is something that we don't fundraise for. We do in terms of crowdfunding. So we managed to have over 350 donations in gathering some 10,000-ish euros for this initiative, meaning that people in Serbia, and bring in it's a relatively poor society, it is a big amount of money for such an initiative. Usually people here only donate for puppies and shelters and things like that. So we're really happy with what's going on. We're really happy with, basically we managed to get some sort of a recognition in terms of the police saying that they don't have legal grounds to do this. So we're still having some things we're working on. I cannot go into too much about it. But yeah, the MEPs have reacted. The police has acknowledged their reaction, so we are still waiting on developments that lead up to a final conclusion that the police admits in writing that they're not allowed to use such a system, and then we see where we go afterwards. Not to basically go a step ahead before we have a clear situation. So we are hopeful that we'll be able to block implementation of biometric mass surveillance in Belgrade, because if this goes through here, there are chances that Hungary might follow, that obviously Montenegro, North Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, Poland, Slovakia, other countries, France, Germany, no one knows actually where it might go next. So it's very important that we all work together. I really greet the resolution that the Greens are adopting on banning biometric mass surveillance, and I hope that every MEP, MP, maybe hopefully a chancellor of a big country in the near future will have this stance that they want to ban biometric mass surveillance. Thank you very much for the time. I will be happy to answer any further questions in the Q&A.
Thank you. You are all perfect in time. Well done. Now I give Annika 5 minutes to present our campaign in the group, and then, of course, we will let the floor have questions. Thanks. Go on, Annika.
Thanks so much, Gwen, and thank you to all the amazing speakers today. What an amazing way to spend a Friday afternoon with all of you. Greetings from Brussels. It's great to see all of you. I feel like I've come home because I've kind of grown up also in at the EGP councils and with the European Greens. So it's great to be here today and with such amazing experts. It's absolutely an honor. And thanks to Team Gwen for helping make this campaign event also happen at the council today. So just briefly an overview and also sort of a summary of what has been said so far on the couple of reasons behind why the Greens EFA group is campaigning on this, but also just to share a few practical ways on how you can join. And if you are watching at home or wherever you are on your Zoom and you feel like you want to help out, you want to stop this trend, you want to build a better world where no one has to be living under suspicion, and a world where safety actually comes from communities and not imposed on them from above. I'll walk you through a couple of those ideas. So as mentioned by Gwen before, this is the Ban Biometrics campaign is under the umbrella of the Rights and Democracy cluster in the Greens EFA group in the European Parliament. So we obviously have our human rights and fundamental rights, democracy glasses on when we're looking at this phenomenon. And we heard many of the reasons why we find these technologies very unethical. And as we know, they are not neutral, they are very biased, and we should not take them as something that has been given or something that has just exists as something outside of us. It has been designed by a specific group of people to monitor on other groups of people, and we should always keep that in mind. We know that these technologies amplify the underlying inequalities and amplify the discriminations, as we heard from our experts today. And the reason why this campaign and this action is so important for us at this very moment is because we see a very worrisome trend because of the COVID restrictions, and we feel like it's like the Trojan horse that's slowly being implemented on our streets. The COVID apps are a great way to introduce a biometric mass surveillance into our lives. And for the moment in the campaign, we are focusing on the surveillance in public spaces, because we also understand and are very worried by the effect that might have on the right to protest, the right to hold your partner's hand freely on the streets without fear, the right not to be falsely incriminated or arrested, as we know. And we're seeing great progress by civil society, by anti-racist and digital organizations in other countries, but unfortunately still in Europe, for some reason, the decisions are not on our side, and the law is not protecting us from this trend. So we are advocating for a ban EU-wide, and we're full speed with our campaign. You might have seen some of our social media actions so far. We're also standing side by side, of course, with civil society, supporting the Reclaim Your Face campaign and the European Citizens Initiative, which I hope all of you have signed by now. If you haven't, I'm sure Andrea can share the link also in the chat. But of anti-racism and discrimination, which is taking over Europe at the moment, and we need to put an end to this. We cannot accept a society where we're being surveilled and rated according to our biometric features. This is the reason why we're also here. We feel like it's extremely important that our friends and family in different European countries and the region are aware of this risk, that you're aware of this trend, and that you feel empowered to act and to join us on this call to building an anti-racist, safe, well-being Europe where everybody can thrive and have a good life, as democracies should allow us to have those kinds of lives of love and happiness. A couple of actions that I want to share with you, which you can do. So obviously sharing the ECI is number one. We really call on everybody to do that, to send a strong message to the Commission, to let them know we're not happy, we're making noise, we're here and we're united with 61 NGOs and so many tens of thousands of signatures already. The Reclaim Your Face campaign is phenomenal, and we're fully endorsing it. So please go sign. If you haven't, it just takes like a minute and a half. Do it. It has a big impact, and share it with your friends. Also, we've hosted a bunch of events this spring to hear also from and center the voices of different civil society actors. You can go watch them if you want to learn more about this event, this campaign, sorry. Friday afternoon, getting words mixed up a little bit. You can find them on the Greens FI YouTube channel. The recordings are there. You can hear from leading activists, both in Europe, but also in the US, where great progress is being made to ban, for instance, facial recognition in public spaces, and learn more, because obviously we're always on a growth trajectory and we can always learn more. So put that on while you're cooking, have it in the background, and get informed and hear from the experts who are fighting at the front line against these technologies. Also, what you might have noticed, we have tabled a resolution at this council. With that resolution, we call for people also to get active at local level. Of course, the campaign, our call is to get the EU to act on this, to get the Commission to propose a ban, but there's many ways you can support go against this trend also at a local level. So if you're running in local elections, bring this up, ask other people, ask your local council persons how they are feeling about this, because cities also hold a big power. And if you have contact to your MEPs or MPs, let them know, give them a shout, tweet them and tell them that this is a big human rights concern, which is happening right under our noses, and we will not let that happen. And of course, something last but not least, I know I had 5 minutes, so I'm going to try also, because everybody else was super good on the schedule, so I don't want to go beyond it either. We actually have a little bit of a sneak peek to share with you today, and we wanted to have it exclusive with you today. In about exactly a month from now, actually, the Green Zephyr Group will be launching a social impact video game, which will be a campaign tool where we will be allowing people throughout the world to see how impossible it is to escape biometric mass surveillance. As a little character in the game, you'll be navigating through a world where you're surveillanced and there's different obstacles in your way, and your goal is to try and make it through in a world and see, would you make it? If this were to become a reality, as it already is in many places, but if that was the case, could you make it? So I'm very excited to share this with you. It's something huge. We haven't done this before. It's a new territory for us also, but a little teaser on that, and a little update on the fact that if you subscribe, for instance, to our campaign newsletter, I'll put the link on the chat. You'll be the first one to know when we go live at the end of next month. And for any questions, anything related to how you can join, how you can help, feel free to email me, get in touch, send me a message on Twitter. We're here and we're protecting for your rights in the European Parliament. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. So now I propose that we take questions. I guess I should be able to see if you have your hands raised, but I don't see any hands raised. Is it because I can't see the hands, or so I see one? Yes, okay. So or you can go in the question and answer section, but then I have seen so go on, Maché. I don't know if I'm the one unmuting you or you can unmute yourself. Sorry for this. No, I see you there. So perfect. Go
okay. Hi, thank you for this interesting introduction to the question to Andrea. You mentioned that in April the European Commission proposed a partial ban of mass biometric surveillance, and could you share some more details about it? What was banned, what was not banned, and why this idea is still dangerous and needs to be countered? Thanks.
Okay, I maybe we just collect other questions before, if they are, but maybe they're not. I don't see some, so I would also, I think if you could, Juliana, elaborate on a concrete example of how discrimination is done by this facial recognition, what's behind, why are why is it discriminatory, why is it not working? I think it would be important for everyone to really understand it. So first Andrea and then Juliana.
Thank you. Yes, so we actually released also a statement in reaction to that proposal's draft. So I will paste the link right after my answer in the chat as well, so you can see a bit more. But in general, we were very pleased to see that the Commission acknowledged that biometric mass surveillance practices have a seriously intrusive impact on people's rights and freedoms. And also that these technologies can affect the private life of a large part of the population and evoke a feeling of constant surveillance. So this realization was very important to have there. And these are really exactly what we are pointing at and the reasons why we're fighting for a ban. However, we weren't so happy with the idea that people are not protected enough from the wide range of biometric mass surveillance practices that we are already seeing happening across Europe. So the proposal somehow contradicts itself by permitting certain forms of biometric mass surveillance that the Commission acknowledged are incompatible with our fundamental rights or freedoms. And specifically, we are looking at prohibition of real-time remote biometric identification for law enforcement purposes. But there are many pitfalls. For example, the wording is often very vague and it contains a number of concepts very poorly defined. There's room for interpretation. And these are exactly the problems in the existing data protection laws that led us to call for a new law banning it. Secondly, the prohibition only applies to law enforcement, and it fails to prohibit equally invasive, dangerous uses by other government authorities or private companies, which are also biometric mass surveillance. Thirdly, the prohibition of law enforcement has many exceptions that are defined too broadly and can be easily exploited. Another point is that the real-time identification by law enforcement is the only one that is prohibited. And if we're looking at Clearview AI, we're seeing that there wasn't any any real-time identification happening there, but in the same time, we had law enforcement access to billions of faces of people, which is, again, a detail that needs to be tackled by this legislation. And finally, all other types of biometric identification practices, and including pseudo-scientific and highly discriminatory practices of biometric categorization, are allowed under this proposal. So these are all gaps that really need to be filled in order to have meaningful impact on biometric mass surveillance as we see it today. Thank you.
Yes, before I leave you the floor, Juliana, just to add that indeed we were very disappointed in the group too that the restriction wasn't a simple ban, in fact, and that there are these exceptions about enforcement law, because indeed this is exactly already the arguments that are used by most states to use them. And France, for example, is one of these states that has so many good reasons of law enforcement to use them, they always manage to get through, saying that it's you know, it's to counter terrorism, it's to counter this, and to use it in the end. So for the moment, these restrictions won't in fact impact a lot what the states are already doing. Juliana, on the topic of discrimination, I let you go.
Yes, I would just complement to the brilliant explanation of Andrea. I have nothing more to say because you're talking about the same tool and how the performance is undertaken. But in a nutshell, when you have a tool that detects, compares, and identifies people in a certain way at a high scale, and put these people in a position of risk of misidentification. This is a violation of human rights. This misidentification is leading to practices that are abusive, like stop and set. So if I don't recognize you, I can control you. And I can control where you go, I can stop you. And by stopping and searching, it's not only the practice of stopping and searching, is by therefore I'm collecting more data by stopping and searching, because then I have your digital fingerprint, then you have your information. So you collect extra data and inform and transfer this data to the other database. That's one point. The other point is that this is also being used to criminalize some liberties. Do not forget the pretext of the G20 in Hamburg, how this was used to criminalize protesters. So either the misidentification leads to violations of rights, or either the abusive identification leads to discriminatory practice that are preventing civil liberties. So this is, in a nutshell, a very short answer to this question.
Thank you. I have two questions in the question and answer window. So Jenny Smith is asking all of you, how can we educate young people on these issues? So you can, I will give you all the floor. And then Lennart Hartmann is asking, you mentioned that on a city level, there is much you can do. Could you highlight some initiatives that would be useful on this level of government, aside from speaking out until talking to our MP and MPs? So I propose there again that you all answer this one. Okay, thanks for these questions. And we will start maybe again with Andrea, Juliana, and then Andre. Go on, Andrea.
Thank you. I think in terms of educating young people and making them aware of the topic is very good to first explain how they are impacted as young people. We were recently in a discussion with a group organizing for youth rights, and they pointed how weirded out they are at the recent proctoring practices during exams with new technologies that are basically monitoring faces live, and every single kind of eye movement, or plus the inaccuracies that Juliana also previously mentioned at recognizing the faces that are not purely white. So this, for example, this practice is a great signal for many young people in pointing at the issues. Then, of course, there's surveillance in campuses that was showing more and more before the pandemic, and it was more visible because, well, people were still in campuses at the time. And finally, student protests that have been really incremental in so many movements in the past years will be very difficult to organize, and people will be less willing to participate if they know that they are surveilled, and their participation in this process might impact their next employment, their next university or PhD application. These are all things that perhaps, if you're unsure, you might not want to go to that protest. And these are very deactivating democratic powers that are happening there. And of course, explaining that this is considering how much evidence there is at how not okay biometric mass surveillance is at this moment. It's really, we shouldn't be talking about it anymore. It's kind of common sense already. So I hope that the for obvious points that youth might be reflecting on.
It's always very difficult to come after Andrea because she brilliantly covers everything. So I just give something that is some additional. I totally agree with her, but I think on everything related to young population, children and teenagers, on everything that talking about debunking some stereotypes and myths, we have to have a decolonial approach on everything. So really the colonial approach on education, the colonial approach on algorithms, artificial intelligence. And by saying that, what I'm trying to say is that we have to understand what is behind the creation of these systems, how the systems they use to privilege one group compared to the other, how these systems are oppressing digitally forms of historical oppressions. And by doing that, you can only do if you bring more awareness, if you unveil some past abuses, if you understand on how some categories of identities, they are created for manipulation. And digitalization is also about that. So here we leave also the room for the new educators on how transversally they're going to also cover technology in their curricula, because this is something in some countries like Canada, kids, they learn how to develop apps in high school at the level of age of 12. 30. So also to understand how these biases are being transmitted to these kids to a certain such early age. So here is also again the role on how to educate everybody who educates our children.
Yeah. So well, just a few things that were tackled upon, and I'd like to basically add up. I obviously agree with everything that was said before. Why we're very cautious to raise the discrimination argument, especially in fora where people producing these types of technology are present, is the reason that the next step would be using even more personal data to make the technology work better in terms of more precise recognition of particular features for different types of minority groups or genders, or even tattoos, makeup, and other types of covers. So unfortunately, not everything can be fixed. And this is one of the things that definitely cannot be fixed. The better it becomes, the more perfect it becomes, the worse it is to society. So I'm speaking as a community, as an organization as well, and me personally, do not believe that this type of technology can have any safeguards that are relevant enough and trustworthy enough to make us believe that use of this type of technology can be acceptable in any setting, except for situations in which is strong, very, very controlled and very limited to a particular building, to a particular very limited space, etc. If you put face recognition or any other type of biometric, because next might be DNA, might be whatever that is easily extracted and can be done so on mass level. And I'm an engineer, so I know what happens when people tap into this type of rabbit holes. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and like it gets crazy at some point. So why a ban is very important. That is one of the main reasons, because there is no way, and I believe that as an expert, as an engineer, I say that we could make this better in any way. And it's not only a question of technology. We cannot rely on any piece of code or hardware to make such assumptions, and right or wrong assumptions. That's for me less relevant. But recording every human transaction in the physical space in a database is sick. That's kind of pathology. That's hoarding of stalking, like stalking and hoarding together. So you hoard every human transaction in physical space, and you stalk every person in the city. We even if the time of how long you keep the records is limited, etc. Imagine an investigative journalism in it's going to be possible in Belgrade if this is being used. Like, and it not always has to be for a greater value. You can go and have a drink in the park, and that's your damn reason. You have the right to do so. Why should your political opponents know that you drank 5 beers in some park anywhere? The youth as well. And I'd like to continue in that line for what we are trying to do with especially people who are not as aware as or sensible to human rights in general. I mean, Serbia is a pretty homogeneous society. I mean, almost all population, a big portion of population is white, Christian. So it's really minorities in terms, besides Roma minority, are not as visible in the public space here. So it's really hard for people to be aware that discrimination on such level happens compared to people who live in the more multicultural societies, like in Western Europe, etc. So regular people, so to say, it's really an additional step is needed for them to be able to articulate discrimination in that way. There's obviously discrimination of women, LGBTQ, etc. But still, we had to, and I think that we succeeded in a way to make them believe that it's not only a problem of the minority, it's their problem as well. So it's the problem of everyone. It's no one's protected from this, because we're used to having the most vulnerable groups being the victim in many situations. In this situation, we're all victims. Obviously, the most vulnerable groups have more repercussions and more consequences, and it impacts their lives even worse. But privileged people are also going to eventually become victims of this. Politicians, the political elites of one side or another, are also going to become a target, because everyone's a target. As simple as that. So we try to play with different forms of content that we produce, video. I like what Annika mentioned about the game. That's amazing. That's really good. That's one very smart tool how to engage young people to learn concepts who are not really that close to them. Instagram, TikTok, we use all the available tools that we have in order to get to a broader range of people. Other than that, media appearances have helped a lot. Our press clipping has been quite impressive when it comes to this. There was over, I think, somewhere around 250 to 300 media appearances in the past year alone regarding biometric mass surveillance around the case study in Belgrade, which is an impressive number. And even the ministry did react to that. They said there is over 250 articles on this topic on a public parliamentary hearing. So what we are trying to do basically is to put this topic as high on the political agenda as possible. And you have helped us with that quite a lot. And on the other side, try to build a community that understands why this system, why this technology is problematic. And there is no way that technology or more money investing into this system, investment into the system can make it better. So it's broken and it cannot be fixed.
Yes, thank you so much for this, Andre. I saw, Annika, that you raised your hand, so I will give you the floor just after me. I wanted also to tell everyone that I'm sorry, very sorry to leave at 45 sharp to run for a train, because I wasn't supposed to be in Paris today, so it's a bit complicated. So if ever you overlap, but you can't overlap more than 5 minutes anyway, because then you have to go to the rest of the EGP program, but I will leave Annika to conclude. Just to jump in what Andre just said, of course, this is really a very important thing to say, that there are two levels. The first level and the most superficial level, I would say, even if it has real impacts on some people's lives, is for us to fight very much against the fact that these tools are discriminatory, and say that and have it clear for everyone. because it's so unfair, and it is once again criminalizing people that are already criminalized, and it is over-policing people that are already policed. But there is the fundamental fight, and that's the second level, and this is why we Greens are calling for a ban, and we're not calling for these regulatory systems or these safeguards or this, because it is public policies are not made for one moment and one situation. Public policies are made for the long term, whoever gets into power and whatever we do. This should always be, as politics are, you know, we should always have this long-term perspective, and so if a tool is useful at a very moment for a very specific situation, and it's a dangerous tool, maybe sometimes it is possible, but then it should be so restrained in time. And the idea that we will now be in societies where we are surveilled everywhere, and as you said, André, just drinking a coffee shouldn't be surveilled. And we need to work more also on this concept and how we can use this concept, because it has become indeed quite normal to be surveilled in public spaces. Like it seems very normal to our young people to be very surveilled also on the way you use things online. I mean, my daughter, 16 years old daughter, she's not surprised by the fact that she will receive only advertisement proposal that are exactly in line with what she wants in life, and I have to explain to her, well, yes, that is because you are surveilled, and the algorithm have understood your taste and your wish and all this, and they're only going to propose. And you know, this is not miraculous. This is not just come by magic. This is because you are surveilled, and our young people are not at all aware of that. But I don't think only the young one. So this fight about the idea that we shouldn't be surveilled everywhere is really also a very long-term structural fight that we need to take, of course, and I agree with you, André, no safeguards will ever make this legitimate. Thank you to all of you. I will let Annika now take the floor. I see there's no more questions, so we should be able to finish in time. Annika, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Gwen, and thank you for moderating. Good luck with the train. I hope you catch it on time. I hope you make it, and I hope you have an amazing weekend. Thanks so much for you and the team for making this possible today. I really just wanted to highlight something that was also already mentioned in Gwen's final remarks. This is about a fundamental change. This is about the way our societies are built. Are we building societies on trust? Are we building societies on well-being and safety and equality? Because once this Pandora's box is open, it's impossible to close it. It's out there, and we are allowing these technologies into our lives. There's no way, as André said, to make them better, because as we make them better, we're making them even more dangerous to the people who are most affected. For the youth comment, I also wanted to just build on what Andrea said about connecting it to something, a lived reality, such as student protests or the exams are being monitored in those spaces. But also, let's not forget that many people in the youth community are also queer, people of color. These are their lived experiences, and they are minority people. We're not talking only about white youth, privileged youth. We're talking about a multiple, diverse pool of young people who have to grow up in a world where they're seeing this sort of technologies normalized. So let's be the voice of reason, and let's put an end to this. I have no other closing words. I wanted to see if there's any of our other panelists. Otherwise, I think we can close on time and let Gwen also run off to her train.
Andrea, raise your hand. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a very quick remark that connects also to Annika's announcement about the game. We're planning a sort of a social media stunt that involves putting a paper bag on a head, because it is so difficult to evade these systems, and that is the only solution. And then we're drawing the attention that it's a bit uncomfortable to walk around like that, and that's why we need the legal ban. And I thought it's very nicely connected with what Annika announced earlier, so it would be great if anyone is interested in joining this to also get in touch. And Annika we will definitely get in touch about coordinating this. But thank you very much for today. And it was really, really inspiring to hear from all colleagues and you about your plans.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks so much. I think we're all closing together. Have a fantastic weekend. Thanks so much for joining.
Join us for the rest of the program, which you can follow on our both Facebook, YouTube, and the SpotMe platform if you are registered. Maybe the next chancellor will.
Perfect. Thanks, Vesna.
Very good plenary coming and very good keynote speeches. So yes, do with women. Okay, have a very nice evening and go on with the rest of the council. Bye.